The main character of this story had only one desire in life, to reach the peak of martial arts. But as time passed, he realized that even if he spent his entire life training, it would never be enough to achieve this dream. It wasn't his destiny to reach the pinnacle of martial arts mastery. Still, in his deep despair, he refused to give up. He decided to pursue an ancient legend, an age-old tale about a divine dragon guarding a golden fruit. After a fierce and deadly battle against the divine guardian dragon, said to grant immortality to whoever eats it, he finally reached the holy site where the legendary fruit is said to grow. He couldn't believe his eyes. The golden fruit of legend was real. Dazzling golden light lit up the surroundings, radiating a mysterious and divine aura. Exhausted from the long fight, he sat atop the carcass of the divine dragon he had slain, his eyes fixed on the glowing fruit. After a breather, he slowly stood up and approached the tree. He was full of self-confidence. With this fruit, he believed he could finally reach the peak of martial arts he dreamed of his whole life. Without hesitation, he plucked the golden fruit and started eating it. The moment he swallowed the fruit, a strange and powerful energy surged through his entire body. His veins throbbed, his blood boiled, and his whole being trembled, as if being reshaped by some divine power. That was when it was revealed that this man's name was Giltaz, Dragon. The one known as the strongest person in the world. But decades later, Giltaz, Dragon had grown old. He lay weak in his bed, surrounded by his children and grandchildren. They whispered that his time was almost up. And they were talking about how they had to accept that he would soon pass away. The eldest son Gilliam held his father's hand tightly. The head of the Dragon family, Giltaz, told his son he didn't want to see sadness on their faces. He just said, "Your time has come." With a forced smile and a trembling voice, Gilliam said the manor was already gloomy. She said gloom settled over the manor when their mother died, and it would become even more desolate once their father was gone too. But Giltaz gently reminded her not to give in to weakness or be overwhelmed by grief. Then, as silence filled the room, Giltaz thought of the golden fruit. After all, he admitted to himself that maybe no one could truly believe in ancient legends, yet he still felt lucky. Because he had lived long enough to start a family of his own. He told his loved ones that he lived a long, full life and had no regrets. But deep down, he knew it was a lie. Even now, he couldn't give up on his dream. If only he had a bit more time, he would have kept chasing the peak of martial arts. That dream that eluded him his entire life. And so, in his final moments, he clung to this desire until his last breath. But unexpectedly, Giltaz opened his eyes once more. Confused, he wondered if he had just fallen asleep. Everything was strange. The room his body was light as a feather, and his surroundings weren't familiar at all. When he finally looked at his hands, his eyes widened in total shock. These aren't my hands, or am I a baby? Before long, he realized he was in a strange situation. But as a 10-star martial artist, he wondered how someone could do this without him noticing. Then it suddenly hit him. The divine dragon and the golden fruit. He finally understood that the fruit's effect wasn't immortality. On the contrary, it was a rebirth. Unexpected as it was, this realization filled him with joy. He was given one more chance. A second life to reach the summit he couldn't reach before. Soon after, he realized he wasn't alone in the room. Looking around, he realized he was in the annex of Long Dragon Manor. Somehow, he was reborn into the same family. Then she noticed the room was full of other babies. Just as I was wondering why there were so many babies here, a group of maids walked in with bottles in their hands. But strangely, instead of milk, they were carrying a red liquid. Giltaz watched the servants pour. She thought they were going to feed that bright red substance to the babies in bottles. But suddenly, one of the servants brought in a goblin. They forced the bottle into the goblin's mouth. Seconds later, the goblin began to shake violently. A red light burst from his body. And then he exploded into a bloody spray, soaking the whole room. Giltaz froze in shock. His mind was filled with fear and confusion. What the hell is going on here? One of the servants calmly said that the mixture would be safe if they adjusted it with the right amount of water. As they began feeding the red liquid to the other babies, another servant took Giltaz himself into her arms. He looked at the bottle and knew right away it wasn't milk. The energy radiating from it was terrifyingly powerful. He could feel the liquid was dragon's blood, and it was far too dangerous for a newborn's delicate body. But before she could react, the maid pressed the bottle to her mouth. Like every baby, he instinctively began to drink. Instantly, a surge of immense power coursed through his veins. His small body trembled with pain, but Gilfus recognized the feeling. The blood of ancient dragons flowed in his veins. He thought it was dangerous, but maybe it's also an opportunity. At first he thought about stopping, but then he realized that if he could absorb this power, he could even surpass his old self. Finally, he could reach the true peak of martial arts. With unwavering resolve, he continued to drink the dragon's blood. His veins bulged, his body contorted in agony, but his will remained unbroken. Don't underestimate me, he thought. I'm Ben, the Glussal Dragon. He repeated these words in his mind like a mantra, endured the pain, and miraculously overcame it. The servant watched in disbelief as he kept drinking and survived what should have been a death warrant. Inside that tiny body, two massive dragon energies vied fiercely for dominance. When one finally overcame the other, Gilfus couldn't believe how easily he absorbed the power as the two dragon forces finally merged within him. He realized it was a perfect opportunity. After drinking the very last drop, he couldn't believe he'd survived that crushing pain. His body didn't explode, on the contrary, it adapted. He noticed a few more babies had survived, which made him smirk inside. So, he thought, one should never underestimate a newborn baby's survival instincts. But as expected of a baby's body, exhaustion soon overcame him. His eyelids grew heavy, and despite his victory, the reborn strongest human, Gilfus's dragon, slowly fell into a slumber, 7 years later. Now he was doing intense physical training, doing one-handed push-ups with a massive rock on his feet. When he finally reached his 1000th rep, he tossed the rock up, and as it thudded back onto his shoulders, Gilfus couldn't believe the power his body now possessed. Gilfus, the former head of the Eldragon clan, was now living as Zeke Eldragon. Zeke wondered how he'd attained such physical strength at such a young age. He realized this was entirely thanks to the ancient dragon blood flowing through his veins. Word is that every being in this world possessed something called a power source. But the ancient dragon blood given to them as babies contained a massive amount of this power. Those who drank it and survived would develop bodies many times stronger than ordinary people. Thanks to the divine dragon power source within him, Zeke knew he had already surpassed the limits he reached at the same age in his past life. Moreover, as he was the only infant who managed to drink an entire bottle of ancient dragon blood, his body underwent a profound transformation beyond even his own expectations. Yet despite all this progress, what annoyed him most was that he was still only a 1-star. He had trained non-stop, hoping to reach at least 4 stars by now. A star was the measure of someone's power source in this world. They say the human body is like a universe, and the more stars floating in that inner universe, the stronger one becomes. But as the number of stars grew, the difficulty of reaching the next level would also increase. In his past life as Gilfus Eldraden, Zeke had reached an unimaginable 10 stars. He was the only one in the world who could reach this level. Time flies so fast, Zeke muttered. Now he was 7 years old. It turns out he's the illegitimate child of the current head of the Eldraden family. His mother had died when he was an infant, and he hadn't seen his father's face even once to this day. Who saw this as a great irresponsibility. What shocked him most was that 1,000 years had already passed since his reincarnation. Reincarnation itself was already incredible, but after 1,000 years, the world had changed so much. It had become a true era of survival of the fittest. The greatest proof of this was feeding babies ancient dragon blood, followed by a ritual called the dragon trial. Only those who drank dragon blood and survived the dragon trial were deemed worthy of training. As Eldragon warriors, naturally Zeke should have been one of them too. But whenever he asked the servant why no tutor was sent to train him, the servant would simply say they didn't have the authority to answer such questions. Even at 7 years old, Zeke hadn't taken a single lesson. Isn't that strange? Zeke thought out loud. Every child who survived the dragon trial had to begin their combat training. Everyone's except his own. As the days went by, he lived all alone with only a servant by his side. When she confronted the servant with this, the servant simply asked what was wrong with it. Zeke sighed and said let it be for now. Building his body was already more important than fight training. After all, he could teach himself if he wanted. In his past life, he was once a 10-star warrior. Ziki then asked for information about the other surviving babies or anything about the main family that could help her, but the maid refused once again. A look of frustration washed over Ziki's face as he said he wasn't allowed to disclose such information. He asked harshly if she would always refuse to answer him. The maid firmly repeated that she could not speak of such matters. "Isn't that cruel?" Ziki asked bitterly. "Treating me like this?" But the maid explained she was just following orders. He said your job is to take care of Ziki's daily needs, nothing more. The maid Zikai, a 3-star fighter, could easily teach basic combat techniques, but Ziki had no interest in such trivial lessons. After 7 years with this maid, he'd grown used to the same lifeless reactions. Finally, Ziki decided to leave and head into the forest. The maid didn't say anything. She just watched Ziki walk away. So, did he really think he'd let me go? Ziki thought, a touch of irritation in his voice. Deep in the forest, Ziki uprooted the wild poisonous herbs and ate them without hesitation. It tasted disgusting, just like before. But this was part of his training method. Then she suddenly noticed something. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. Repeating, be patient, to himself, he could feel someone or something watching him from afar, observing his every move. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get rid of this entity. A few minutes later, Zikai sighed. They followed me all the way here, huh? When he couldn't take it anymore, he called out. If you have something to say, you'd better show yourself. Then he went into the tall grass, hiding himself. A few seconds later, while crouching in the grass, Ziki felt a dark, oppressive aura nearby. Looking toward the source, Wrath saw a creature known as a wild boar. He wondered what this aura was all about. The chaos surrounding the monster was something he had never seen before, even 1,000 years ago. While Anger was eating hogweed, Ziki suddenly stood up, showed himself, and startled the beast. The creature attacked him immediately, hiding himself. A few seconds later, while crouching in the grass, Ziki felt a dark, oppressive aura nearby, gathering a golden energy into his fist. With a powerful strike, Fury created an explosion that tore the wild boar's body apart. He couldn't help but smirk at the sight. His attack was much stronger than she expected. Despite being at the 1-star level, his power surpassed most fighters at the same stage. Tossing the creature he killed over his shoulder, Ziki muttered, "It'll be even better when I raise my star level." He was fed up, he was exhausted. By the Ledger family, from 7 years of being ignored and left alone. He wondered if it was time to leave and travel on his own. Maybe he should have embarked on an adventure toward the ocean. Meanwhile, in the distance, a cloaked man watched from the shadows. "What is going on with this kid?" she muttered. He reached 1-star level even without formal training and killed that frenzied boar in a single hit. What confused the man even more was how Ziki managed to sense his presence. "This kid is no ordinary child," he said quietly. He remembered that Ziki's mother died young. And his father, the current head of the family, paid him no attention at all. Without proper guidance, the kid shouldn't have become this strong. Still, as the son of the Eldredon chief, illegitimate or not, Ziki had to remain under the clan's watch. That's why someone like him was assigned to watch over the child from the shadows. An illegitimate son, but the head of the family's blood runs through his veins, the man whispered. Could this be why it's so powerful? She chuckled softly, feeling unsure. It'll be interesting to watch this kid in the future. Then he vanished into the darkness. Back at Ziki's house, the boy was packing his bags, ready to set off on his journey. But suddenly, he felt several powerful presences outside. 3 4-star and 1 5-star practitioners. What are these doing here, he wondered. When she quietly approached the door and eavesdropped, she heard them talking about how fresh and clean the air was, and how peaceful such a remote place was without any rifts nearby. Hearing this, Ziki concluded that they were not assassins. They didn't seem like bad people at all. So he decided to confront them directly, opened the door, and asked, "What are you doing here?" The group froze in shock. Then Ziki noticed the emblem embroidered on his clothes, the seal of the Dragon Clan. He heard them talk about how peaceful such a remote place was, since there were no rifts nearby. Their leader said, "We were sent to take you to your testing site." An exam? Zeke frowned in confusion, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. They expect me to take the exam, he muttered, even though they haven't taught me a single thing yet. And a few days later, Zeke frowned in confusion, a fleeting look of frustration crossing his face. They expect me to take the exam, he muttered. To face a dragon, he whispered to himself. Wondering what they wanted from him, the men bowed quickly and said, It is an honor to finally meet you, young Master Zeke. On the contrary, it was brought for another purpose. Before going inside, they told him to change his dirty clothes first. After 1,000 years, the dragon family founded a school to serve all branches of their lineage. Anyone with any connection to the dragon family dreamed of entering the so-called dragon's nest to get a proper education once they turned 7, and today was the day of that academy's entrance ceremony. Zeke was here to take the entrance exam, even though he hadn't learned anything about the modern generation of his family. Taking the exam was mandatory. Zeke was instantly disappointed. When he realized this was the real reason they brought him here, he wondered why now, just as he'd decided to go and travel the world. As he sat by the school gate, a boy from Ortescal village approached him. Rangusta came by, asked if you were okay and what was bothering you. When Zeke asked who he was, the boy formally introduced himself as Rangust and said he came because Zeke looked troubled. Is that so? Zeke replied indifferently. After observing the energy flow in Rangustin's body, Zeke quietly thought the boy seemed shy but had an unusually strong sense of perception. Zeke then apologized for his state and introduced himself, admitting his mind was spinning because he had no idea what they were supposed to do on the exam. Rangust, getting a bit tense hearing the word exam, asked, Is that all? He started explaining anyway. He said the Dragon's Nest annual entrance exam hadn't changed much, but Rangust was shocked to learn that Zeke knew absolutely nothing about the exam. Taking the exam with zero knowledge, wasn't that way too reckless and dangerous? Just as Tam Rangust was about to explain the details of the exam, a loud and arrogant voice suddenly interrupted him. An arrogant brat shouted, calling Rangust a loser. Rangust turned around in shock and recognized instantly who it was. That was Redden, teasing him, also from Mordor Polkoi. Redden took a jab, asking what she was doing here and saying she must be lost. Rangust was shocked. Taking the exam with zero knowledge, wasn't that way too reckless and dangerous? As Redden approached, though his voice trembled, Rangust replied, I'm here to take the entrance exam. Asking if he was seriously taking the exam, Red started laughing uncontrollably and said it was impossible for him to pass. And isn't your father supposedly a dragon? He even insulted Rangust's father, asking what the so-called son of a dragon could possibly achieve. Rangust's fists trembled as he tried to contain his rage, but Zeke had already noticed everything. We were told that the dragon family has an absolute hierarchy. The ranks were as follows. Fledgling hatchlings, common soldier juvenile dragons, captain rank adult dragons, ruling elder dragons known as patriarchs, and at the very bottom, pseudo-dragons who couldn't enter the nest or graduate. They were seen as immature and incomplete dragons. Still, for a long time, Rangust dreamed of proving they were true dragons, even if they were only called so-called dragons. Zik wondered how Redden was so sure Rangust would fail even before the exam started. Who do you think you are? He snapped. Redden asked if Zikin had a problem. Zik calmly mentioned that he wondered why Red was so sure Rangust wouldn't pass the exam. With that, Redden pointed to Rangust and screamed that the reason was obvious, that he was just a loser. Zik tilted his head and asked if Rangusta was really that weak. Because as far as he could tell, Rangust was even stronger than them. Hearing this, Rangusta's eyes widened in total shock. For the first time in her life, someone had stood up for her. Getting angry, the arrogant kids asked if Zeke was seriously claiming this. That they're weaker than a so-called dragon, a being they look down on. But before things could escalate further, a man stepped forward and caught everyone's attention. This person was the adult dragon supervisor, announcing that the Dragon's Nest entrance exam was about to begin. And he said all participants must register to get their numbers. As Redden left, Zik glared and warned him that he wouldn't forget that face. Zik sighed and said there was no need to get angry. He noted how irritable the children of this generation are. Rangust immediately said that wasn't so strange. After all, he said they were almost the same age. Rangust added that anyone would get angry if they were told they were weaker, wouldn't you say? Zik muttered. Since the entrance exam was mandatory, they had no choice but to take it. Actually, Zik was quite surprised when Rangust said skipping the exam was possible. Ziki's eyes widened in shock, and Rangust realized he truly knew nothing about the matter. Rangust told her it might be better to withdraw now. If you were told he's weaker than him, is that what you'd say? Zik muttered. Since the entrance exam was mandatory, he said he'd never back down from a challenge. Rangust just shook his head and could only say that Ziki was overconfident. Despite knowing squat about the exam, Zikai just laughed and said they had to hurry because the test was about to start, no matter what. Rangustan had no choice but to accept. When they reached the testing area, the proctor announced the exam was simple. To pass, all they had to do was make a scratch on the stones behind it. However, using weapons other than those provided by the academy was not permitted. Still, they could have used their bare hands if they wanted. But every participant only had 3 attempts. Is that all? Daddy, said Ziki, looking quite unimpressed. While still in swaddling clothes, after surviving the dragon's trial, he expected something much more terrible and harsh. But that was disappointingly simple. The examiner called the first participant and instructed them to begin. Nervous but determined, the boy struck the giant paperclip with all his might. The sound of metal hitting rock echoed loudly, ringing in his ears, but as everyone watched in shock, the boy's sword snapped in two and the recoil shattered his arm. As the child writhed in pain, Zeke stood there frozen by what he saw. The proctor calmly told him he still had 2 attempts left, and asked if he wanted to continue. But since the boy could no longer stand, the proctor declared him failed and ordered the others to clear the area as the injured participant was dragged away. The next number has been announced. While Rangus trembled in terror at what he witnessed, Zekian's nerves were beginning to fray. If this is what they call an exam, he muttered. Then he asked what kind of stones they used. It's been stated that the stones have the ability to regenerate. Every scratch made would disappear instantly. What's more, when hit with power, they reflected physical force back at 100-fold. Zekian said such materials are overkill for an entrance exam, but Rangus explained it's still possible to scratch them, if he can properly circulate his origin power throughout his body before attacking. Understood, said Zekian, realizing that source power circulation was far more important than martial arts skills. After glancing at the other participants in this exam, he thought only a few people could pass, including those arrogant brats. As the exam went on, more were failing than passing. Many were badly hurt because the stone reflects ordinary physical attacks. Then, a few seconds later, the proctor called Zekian's number. It's my turn, said Zekian with a calm smile. Rangus, his hands and feet still trembling, asked if he really intended to withdraw. Ahmed just walked forward, telling Zeke not to worry. When he approached the exam proctor, the man's eyes widened in total shock. Zekian's aura began to glow slightly, revealing the power remaining from his past life as Gilphus. The proctor stepped forward and told him to pick a weapon, but Zekian said it wasn't necessary. He said his fists alone would be enough. The crowd began to whisper in disbelief. No matter how skilled they thought one was at circulating source power, there was no way he could have scratched the stone with his bare hands. On the contrary, their fists would have definitely been shattered. Some even said not just Zeke's fists, but his whole arms would be ruined. And this made Langus extremely worried for him. Fearing for his safety, he blamed himself, thinking he should have forcibly stopped Zekian to prevent his injury. The proctor gave the signal to start. As Zeke approached the massive stone, he placed his hand on it, and noted that he had never seen such a material in his life. He thought to himself that this must have formed over 1,000 years ago, and even now, there were still many things about the current generation that he didn't fully understand. But this didn't matter anymore. While he gathered his source power in his fist, Rangus was trembling with anxiety, fearing what Zekian might become. Our boy, meanwhile, was actually full of excitement. Because for the first time, he could use his full power. He decided to use this mysterious stone to measure his current power. When Zeke unleashed the first form of the Dragon Slayer war technique, Rangus's eyes widened once more as he used the explosive strike against the stone. A massive wave of energy erupted from the collision, sending shards of shattered rock flying everywhere as the blast's violent winds scattered dust and debris through the air. Both terrified and guarded, Rangus quickly took cover to protect himself, while the Overseer's eyes widened in disbelief at what he had just witnessed. As the dust slowly settled, Zeke stood there with a smile, noting that the technique he used was still too much for his current power. Despite the serious injuries on his hands, he chuckled to himself, realizing he still needed much more intense training. The other participants were left speechless by what they saw. Redden seemed both surprised and angry that Zeke had destroyed the magic stone. One watching woman commented that Zeke's eye was truly interesting, while others were still in shock over what happened. Zeke waited gleefully for the proctor to announce the results, but the proctor was still in shock. The stone Zeke destroyed was known to regenerate, and it was assumed only those who had reached 4-star level or higher could break it. But now only a kid stood before him, having achieved the seemingly impossible. The Overseer muttered to himself that he was just a bastard, then wondered if Zeke's talent came from the family head's bloodline. So, it's about the blood still flowing through you. He also noticed that the technique Zeke used felt strangely familiar. When the dazed proctor didn't answer immediately, Zeke called out impatiently, asking for the result. The proctor, finally coming to his senses, announced that Zeke passed the test. Then one of the supervisors handed Zeke a small bottle containing a green liquid. Curious, Zeke asked what it was, but the man just asked if he could leave, as he was blocking the road. An irritated Zeke frowned and muttered if everyone in this generation was this rude. Before he could complain further, Rangus rushed over excitedly and praised Zeke's performance. Zeke grinned proudly and said it was chump change. Then he asked what the liquid was. And Rangus explained that this is a healing potion, a standard potion of the ancient dragon family. Healing potion? Zeke repeated. Rangus confirmed it, but Zeke suspected it could be poison since he's the bastard of the family. But with Rangus vouching for it, he wondered if it was actually a spiritual medicine. The elixir known as skyscraper clarity wood was made from extremely rare materials, like herbs found only in secret realms. Not to mention the pure origin power of divine beasts, and the essence of elusive phantom beasts. When used, it wouldn't just heal fresh wounds. It would also heal old scars and injuries. Moreover, its ingredients were so rare they could even increase one's profound strength. And since the brewing process was so complex, such potions were rarely seen. After drinking the potion, Zeke marveled at its instant effect on his body. Is this truly a spiritual medicine? Asked Rangusa. Rangus replied. She said she doesn't know what spiritual medicine means, but she's sure the ancient dragon family's elixirs are far better than any on the market. Rangus then asked if the potion's effect surprised Zeke that much. Of course, said Zeke. Explaining that it healed both his serious wounds and training strain, he noted it didn't seem to boost source power like spiritual medicine. On the other hand, Rangus said Zeke was even more surprised by him. Zeke chuckled and told him not to joke around. Zeke thought to himself that the existence of this potion showed how much knowledge had advanced in the last 1,000 years. Rangus praised Zekanan's power once again. And Zeke declared his dream was to be the strongest of them all. Soon after, the exam proctor announced that Retin and his companions have also passed the exam. Zeke was already expecting this, but then, when his number was called, Rangus trembled nervously. Despite his fear, he gathered his courage and stepped forward. Watching the cascade, Zeke wondered why Rangus was so nervous. Then he shouted to encourage her. He told him to be confident. Embarrassed, Rangus asked him to lower his voice. When Rangus chose a sword as his weapon, he watched closely, wondering what Zeke had messed up. As soon as the examiner gave the signal, Rangus attacked the stone. But as expected, he messed up on his first try. He stood up again to try one more time with determination, but his blow bounced off the stone. This caused him to lose his balance and fall. His hands were shaking because of the stone's reflectivity. Retin and his group burst into laughter. They were saying that exactly as expected, a fake dragon is nothing more than just a fake dragon. They mocked him, telling him to give up. Retin asked if this was the guy Zeke claimed he could pass with a smirk. and asked whether Rangusan was actually stronger than them. Ziki stayed silent for a moment, then told them to stop talking nonsense. The Proctor Rangusa stated that only one attempt remains and asked if you still wish to continue. Overwhelmed by shame and the ridicule of others, Rangus couldn't answer. He bowed his head. But then Ziki walked up to him and asked what the hell he was doing. He questioned why she used a sword instead of a spear. He asked why he chose a weapon that didn't suit him, and why he took an exam without any plan. Breton watched sarcastically as Ziki spoke to Rangusa. He said as he is, no matter how many times he tries, he won't even manage to scratch the stone. Breton and his crew laughed again, calling Ziki stupid and reminding everyone that Rangus didn't know the first thing about using a spear. They said her weak father only taught her swordsmanship, and switching weapons now won't change the outcome. But Ziki ignored their mockery and called out to the supervisor, asking if changing weapons was against the rules. The inspector said this isn't against the rules. With that, Ziki smirked and said, "Then Rangus is lucky." He turned to Rangu and asked if he trusted him. Memories of all the humiliations he endured with his father flashed through Rangus's mind. Standing tall with gritted teeth, he said he would trust Ziki and fight with a spear exactly as he suggested. Rangus said his father never managed to enter the dragon's nest. That's why people called him a fake dragon and made fun of him. But despite all this humiliation, his father endured everything just to raise Rangu properly. That's why Rangus swore to prove to everyone that he, the son his father raised with care, is also a true dragon. He stood up once more, gripped the spear tightly, and declared he would prove today that neither he nor his father were fake dragons. He also realized that if he tried with the sword again, the result would be no different. So this time, she decided to trust Ziki completely. The only problem was, he didn't know how to use a spear. Ziki called to him and said there was nothing else Rangusa needed to do, as he pointed to the magical stone. Just drive the spear straight into the stone, think of nothing else, just pierce through, Ziki said with determination. Rangus gripped the spear tighter. Under normal circumstances, he knew that hitting the stone directly wouldn't cause even the slightest bit of damage. Especially since the stone has such powerful regenerative properties. But Ziki was the first person to stand up for her, even though they had just met that day. It was a new and unfamiliar feeling for her, but that's exactly why Ziki chose to trust completely and believe in her own power. This time, he gathered his source power in the spear and immediately noticed something strange. Despite years of swordsmanship, he had never managed to wrap his blade with this much source energy. Now, he was doing this effortlessly with a spear. With a steady roar, Rangus unleashed all his strength and struck the stone with all his might. Rhett was dying of laughter. He was saying that just as he predicted, changing weapons wouldn't help pass the test. But Rangus didn't stop. He felt something different. It's something powerful. He felt the spear in his hand like an extension of his own body. Then, pushing the weapon with all his might, the spear pierced right through the magic stone. The shock on Retton's face and the looks on his cronies' faces were priceless. Even the proctors couldn't hide their pleasant surprise at what they just witnessed. The Rangus stone hadn't just scratched it, it had pierced right through. Ziki praised him immediately. While Rangus couldn't believe what he had done, even after the inspector officially declared him passed, Rangus still asked in disbelief if he had actually succeeded. Ziki smiled, put his arm around his shoulder, and confirmed it, over the moon with joy. Hugging Ziki tightly, Rangus was on the verge of tears and shouted repeatedly that he did it, that he passed the exam. But Rhett's group refused to believe it. They said it was luck, but Rhett himself stayed silent, trembling with rage. Just like Ziki said, he couldn't accept that Rangus was actually stronger than them. And the result was much better. Then the examiner announced that the exam had officially ended. He then announced that the entrance ceremony would begin shortly. Ziki immediately asked if the exam was really over. Rangus said it looks that way, but added there'll likely be more exams. When they entered the dragon's lair. Before long, a group of men emerged from a dark hallway. When they emerged into the light, the proctor announced that the head of the dragon family would give a speech to congratulate those who passed. The moment she saw the bright man, she asked who that cold and dark-faced person was. Rangus, who was clearly nervous, said he was the head of the family. Ziki, did he say she's the head of the family? Why does it look like that? She doesn't even smile, she's colder than ice. Rangus quickly covered Zeki's mouth. Whispering that it would be best to stay quiet, she begged him to stop talking. Zeki nodded as he looked back at the group. He stated that these people represent the current strength of the dragon family. Some were 7-star level, others were 6-star. Zeki thought their powers were impressive. Especially the current head of the family, Fazal Dragon, was an 8-star level powerhouse. 1,000 years ago, only a handful of people could reach this level. Still, Zeki wasn't sure how many of them there were in this current era. I didn't like this head of the family, Zeki muttered. But before she could say more, Rangus tried to silence her again. Zeki sighed and thought to himself that you never expected this man to be your father in this life. A dark and fiery aura radiated from Batsia's body. It cast a heavy atmosphere over the whole area. The proctor quickly ordered everyone to be quiet as Master Batsi was about to speak. When Baz emerged, he said only a few words. All of them. El Dejdara must strive to be the flesh and blood of his family. When he speaks, the terrifying pressure of his aura. It spread to the living room. Zeki was unimpressed, but most of the test takers are trembling with fear. Some were struggling to breathe. As their bodies froze under that immense pressure, Zeki noticed even Rangus was affected. She couldn't believe how easily everyone around her was crushed by the patriarch's presence. What's more, Zeki could feel an intense hatred hidden within Balza's aura. She didn't know the reason behind it, but she still couldn't like this man at all. His so-called father. When Balza turned around, another man stepped forward and caught everyone's attention. She had blonde hair and thanked Nice and Balzea for their words. Then he said Master Balzan had high expectations. He said he would keep his speech short, just like his master. Zeki wondered who this man was. The speaker told everyone to just train hard and get stronger. One of the proctors murmured, "Is this it?" The man smiled and said people who worry too much go bald early, so he wouldn't bore me with long speeches. Zeki couldn't figure out what their problem was. But at least the atmosphere in the room had softened. The proctor then announced that the new students would now be settled into their dorms. Everyone whose number was called had to go there immediately. Zeki asked if they'd all stay in the same dorm, and Rangus explained there are 4 dorms. East, West, South, and North lands. Every student accepted to the academy was allowed to live in one of these 4 dorms. When Zeki's number was called, he stood up and waved to Rangusa. He was stationed in the East dormitory. Walking down the hall, he told himself that much had changed in this place over the past millennium. After finding her room, she said it took a while to get there because she might have gotten lost, and her roommate probably arrived before her. When she opened the door, she cheerfully greeted her new roommate and apologized for being late. Then he said they'd share a room from today on, but surprisingly, his new roommate turned out to be Rangus himself. Zekai couldn't help but laugh and said it seemed like destiny kept bringing them together. He asked if anything else was planned for that day and confirmed that Rangus training starts tomorrow. Zeki says it casually, "Is that so?" He said. This led Rangus to ask if you hadn't listened to the overseer's previous explanation. Zeki, on the other hand, admitted he was ignoring her on purpose. Rangus sighed and said they should rest early since training starts tomorrow. As Zeki looked out the window, he thought about his plan to escape the dragon family and travel the world, but after what he learned about the regenerative magic stone and the healing potion, he realized he had discovered many interesting things during the exam. If he truly wanted to understand all the changes that had occurred, he thought, staying with the fire dragon family for a while might not be such a bad idea after all to grasp what had happened in the past millennium. After all, a month has passed at the academy, and the training continues to get tougher. The instructor explained to the students holding heavy dumbbells that the dragon's breath technique he taught them is one of the most important, noting it was created by the 15th generation dragon family head. After reminding them they must master this technique under all conditions, the instructor's attention was caught by a few students. He noticed some had already mastered the dragon's breath technique, especially the young woman he called Astalika. His overflowing energy showed he was close to reaching 2-star level. But besides that, another student caught his eye, and he couldn't believe what he saw. While training, Zeki didn't just hold dumbbells, he also balanced large stones on his head and arms. The instructor looked on in disbelief, muttering to himself that the patriarch's blood truly flowed through Zeke's veins. However, rumor has it that no one taught Zeke anything since childhood, so everything she was witnessing now felt foreign to her. Meanwhile, Zeke couldn't believe that the technique the Dragon King once called the breath technique had been further improved. That it passed to the next heads of the family and is now being taught to other branches. According to Zeke, breathing techniques were methods for gathering ambient source power into the body. Once circulated, this source power would strengthen one's own internal energy. The effectiveness of such techniques depended on one's talent and intelligence, which is why the great families of this world kept their techniques secret, never allowing outsiders or those outside their bloodline to learn them. Zeke also realized that Dragon's Breath was a simple and safe technique, easy enough to master. But if it can only be used while resting, it'd be useless to him. His own version of the breathing technique allowed him to manipulate the surrounding source power even while on the move. That's why he was much more complex and powerful in a real fight. But it was much harder to learn. Only a few could master it, and of this generation. He thought they must have simplified their original version so even members of the branch family could learn it. And he saw that this decision clearly helped strengthen the Eldredon family. Zeke couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction. He never imagined the techniques he discovered long ago would still have an impact 1,000 years later. This made him wonder if the other martial arts techniques he created had also evolved over time. Interesting, he muttered to himself, liking the thought. Meanwhile, Lika watched Zeke quietly from a distance. Later in the cafeteria, the other students were astonished to see how much Zeke was eating. While continuing to eat his food greedily, he noticed Rangu sitting silently across from him. What's the problem? Zeke asked if you won't get stronger if you don't eat. Rangus only asked if Zeke himself found his own endurance strange. This is it, Zeke replied. If you want to get stronger, you need to eat more, train harder, and push yourself. He even offered Rangus some of his food, but Rangus politely declined, saying he had eaten enough. Right then, he was wondering how Zeke would be. Just as I was thinking some students were already well trained before entering the academy, a girl suddenly approached them. With a calm but confident tone, she said, "You're quite impressive." Zeke blinked and asked nonchalantly, "And just who are you?" Rangussen's bite immediately caught in his throat, and he whispered nervously. "Don't you know who he is?" "She's the daughter of the head of the Ostalika family. Lord Balzas," Zeke said. Yeah, with a careless shrug. "So what should I do now?" "I don't know him." Cold sweat poured down Rangussen's forehead. "You can't talk like that. One of the candidates for mastery. One of the candidates to be the next head of the family. He's not someone you can talk to that casually." "Is that what you think?" Zeke replied. "So what? I'm the child of a family man too, though I'm the bastard one." Rangus froze deep inside. Lika was looking at him with curiosity. He asked if this was true. "Are you really the clan leader's illegitimate son?" The narrator's voice continued. Lika, an heir to the Eldredon family and a member of the Eldredon squad, now stood personally before Zeke. Zeke shrugged and said, "Why would I lie about that?" Lika frowned slightly. "Then tell me, how can an illegitimate child like you smash the magic stone to pieces with your bare hands? How can someone not from a prominent family have such power?" "Because I'm Zeke," he replied with confidence. And he returned to Ragusa. "Stop staring and finish your food." Both Lika and Rangus fell silent for a moment. Then Lika suddenly smiled. "You're a really interesting person," she said and sat down next to him. "How about serving me?" "I'm going to make you one of my men." Zeke raised an eyebrow. "What exactly do you mean by that?" "He said he wanted me to join him. Be my ally and I'll have your back. Every illegitimate child needs allies and influence, right? Use your power to help me. I'll help you fulfill your own dreams for when I become the next head of the family." Zeke didn't hesitate for a second. No. He just cut it short like that. Lika frowned again. "Why? Don't tell me you want to be the head of the family." With her aura glowing with a slight crackling energy, Zeke could tell she was close to reaching 2-star level. It was truly impressive for someone his age to radiate such an aura. Even so, Zeke remained calm. He said, "I could think whatever I want, but I don't care about being the head of the family or any other title. Why? Lika asked coldly. Zik stabbed his knife into the table. Because I don't need to serve anyone, he said in a steady but sharp voice. I am the most powerful person alive. Silence fell over the cafeteria. Lika couldn't even believe what she was feeling. Zik's presence had completely overwhelmed him for a moment. Rangus quickly stepped in to ease the tension. He called on them both to calm down. But Lika wasn't one to step back. He was both ashamed and enraged by what happened. Zik decided to issue a challenge for a duel. But Zik didn't seem to care and just kept eating. Moments later, a commotion spread across campus. Where are they going? A student asked. To the training area, another replied. It's gonna be a duel between the younger generation. It's Master Lika himself fighting. What?
Hi.
Master Lika, from the Typhoon family? Someone shouted. Who's brave enough to challenge him? When they arrived at the training ground, everyone was whispering among themselves, wondering who would face off against him. Meanwhile, Zik couldn't believe Lika was serious about the duel. Is this okay with you? Rangus asked nervously. Everyone was whispering among themselves, wondering who would face off against him. Meanwhile, Zik, you will fight Master Lika. Even if you call him Master, I don't know who he is. Zik answered bluntly. Still, Rangus tried to explain. What matters now is that you understand who you're fighting. Master Lika is no ordinary opponent. Lord Balza Ledger's daughter, and she carries the blood of the Tefuna family. One of the 4 great families supporting the ancient dragons. A genius who mastered it at a young age. Tefu has mastered every form of his family's hereditary lightning greatsword technique. Just like his father's other children. He has a terrifying talent, too. Zik tilted his head. Other than her being the boss's daughter, I didn't understand a single word she said. Rangus looked at her. How do you not know any of this? Because I don't know, Zik said. It's clear, so don't ask me. Rangus blinked as Zik suddenly laughed. But since I know nothing about him, he said with a smirk, that'll make this fight even more fun. Sounds exciting. Rangus could only sigh and worry. No matter how strong Zik was, Master Lika was on a completely different level. Why did you even accept his challenge? They asked. Zik replied, I never run from any fight. And besides, it looks like my challenger is ready. Right then, Lika stood tall with her sword driven into the ground. His aura glowed and sparks of lightning flickered around him. Are you two done talking? She asked in a cold voice. Lika finally shouted, asking if they were done talking. And Zeke said he was ready. Trembling in fear and shock, Rang's presence vanished from them instantly. He warned Zeke to be careful in her fights. Zeke then turned to Lika and asked why she was so determined to fight him. Lika Edra announced her wish to head the family, and to do so, she had to defeat Zeke and make him one of her followers. What do you mean by that? Asked Zeke, wondering what he had to do with his dream of becoming the head of the family. Lika asked back in response. They asked if he really had no clue about the family's current state, and whether he caused it by being an illegitimate child. That he's so uninformed. Zeke simply said he didn't know and admitted his knowledge of their families was limited. So Lika began to explain. He said there were 5 candidates, including both of them. To become the next head of the family, all the siblings except Zeke were connected with the 4 main subfamilies of the Dragon clan. The position of clan patriarch was so important it became a source of conflict. This is strictly between families. Therefore, all of Zeke's siblings entered the dragon's nest to represent their families and receive training. With the succession struggle turning into fierce competition, Lika needed strong allies to survive. Against his brothers. Zeke immediately realized this was a power struggle between the 4 main branches of the Dragon family. His families. She found it all so complex and wasn't even sure she wanted to understand. Lika continued later. As a candidate for family head, he said he must strengthen not just his knowledge and power, but also his influence by gathering strong followers. Without another word, he declared Zeke's defeat and charged straight at him. And said he'd make him one of his aides. But Zeke easily dodged his powerful blow. And the rain of attacks that followed. But Lika still wouldn't let him escape. Viewers couldn't believe their eyes. The speed of his movements was incredible. Despite Lika's heavy sword, the attacks were so fluid and fast they seemed almost effortless. As they watched the war between brothers, the crowd began to whisper about Lika's precise control. They noticed how the source power and his strikes became faster and stronger over time. They could only admire the power of the head of the family's true daughter from one of the main branches. Some even said the outcome of the fight was already decided. But what they didn't know was that Lika herself was becoming increasingly frustrated. He couldn't understand how Zik dodged every attack, or why it felt like he was just playing with him. Watching from a distance, Ringies couldn't help but be amazed, and his previous worries vanished. Watching Zik's steady movements, Zik later noted that Lika's martial arts were unlike anything he had ever seen before. He admitted that his movements were much faster than any ordinary star-level fighter. But an angry Lika shouted for him to shut up and focus on the fight. Ziki clenched his fist and said he was already focused, adding that was why he could land such a powerful blow so easily. The punch landed perfectly, and Lika died instantly from the impact. He fell to his knees in pain, clutching his sword and his stomach. The audience gasped in shock and began to whisper among themselves. They wondered how Ziki could dodge all of Lika's attacks, and who this mysterious boy really was. Struggling to stand up, Lika asked why none of her blows landed. He knew he was much faster than the other starfighters. So logically, Ziki shouldn't have been able to keep up with her. Ziki admitted he was indeed faster than any one-star fighter he had ever seen. But in his eyes, she was still just a one-star attraction. "You're a star too," Lika snapped. She said AI shouldn't have to keep up with its own speed and movement. "There's a simple reason for this," Ziki replied. "Your breathing, the movement of your eyes, even the twitching of your muscles. I can read it all. By observing these small details, I can predict their next move. It's all about experience." "Don't make me laugh!" Lika yelled, and launched another quick attack at him. But Ziki avoided it easily again, stating that he could see and read his every move, just as he said. Immediately after, he launched a powerful counterattack that slammed Lika hard against the wall. The audience screamed in shock. They were asking if Lika had really been defeated. "Master Ziki, that was amazing." "You beat Lika, Master!" Rangus shouted excitedly. But Ziki calmly said it's not over yet, that their fight isn't finished. When the dust settled, Lika was standing once again. Battered but still defiant. Ziki noticed he could withstand the attack by focusing his resources at the center. And thus, he avoided taking serious damage. He smiled slightly and admitted that Lika was indeed an extraordinary girl. "Enough, Master Lika," Rangus pleaded. But Ziki warned him to back off, saying he could get caught in the middle during their next clash. Right then, Ziki sensed a surge of intense aura radiating from Lika. He wondered if it had risen to 2 stars. The audience noticed it, too. They couldn't have been wrong. The glowing marks on his body were proof of it. It truly was proof that he had reached 2 stars. It was a stage where the source power of 2-star levels could be channeled into martial arts with a white aura. He could even manifest this power as an aura outside his body. Lika thanked Zikai, saying that because of her, she reached the 2-star level. And sooner than expected. But that's exactly why he declared you no longer have a chance to win. With her aura in flames, she lunged toward Ziki. His massive sword was wrapped in a glowing power. Ziki just laughed. He looked really excited. "You've really improved," he said excitedly, while evading yet another fast attack. "Your speed is incredible now." But his expression suddenly changed. "When you feel a sting on your cheek, like a superficial cut." Ziki thought he was sure he had escaped that attack. But Lika smirked. And he asked if she could finally see the power difference between them. "Now this is my true talent," he said proudly. "Now that I'm a full-fledged 2-star and have earned my aura, I'll show you the true power of the real lightning giant sword technique." "Wow. Then I guess I'm about to witness a martial art I've never seen before," Ziki said with an excited smile. This is for him. It was the most exciting and enjoyable moment of their fights. Lika suddenly unleashed the great sword technique, lightning flash. His sword was crackling with a dazzling golden energy. As Lika lunged forward, Ziki was instantly engulfed in a lightning storm and shouted, forced to take a step back. "Wait a second. What kind of technique was that? How can you control lightning like that? Isn't this a bit much for a practice match? Lika smirked and plunged her sword into the ground as a golden light rose around her. You look surprised, he said. He calmly called forth another move, the lightning net. Sparks flew from the ground, creating a glowing electrical grid. The master lunged at Zikai, but she escaped by a hair. He muttered to himself as he landed. His power has increased incredibly. His current power doesn't even come close to what it was. At this rate, this fight won't be easy at all. The audience whispered in awe. They couldn't hide their surprise. Ever since Lika rose to 2-star level, the tide of the battle had completely turned. Watching with concern, Rengus's anxiety began to grow. Ziki noticed that Lika's movements were simple. No new tricks compared to its 1-star form, but every swing of the sword now carried much greater power. The lightning greatsword technique overflowed with power, its aura intensifying every strike. What surprised Ziki even more was how fast it was. Lika was moving much faster than you'd imagine, and his lightning was strangely mysterious. Still, he felt confident. Even if he could shroud himself in thunder, he was sure he could resist it. Still, curiosity filled him. What kind of power was that? Dodging his constant attacks, he wondered how anyone could command a bolt of lightning. Meanwhile, he watched her every move, analyzing her aura and rhythm. Lika, however, had noticed Ziki's calm smile. Seeing that calm smile as she dodged his attacks like a dance, he frowned. Are you still smirking? He scoffed that you're too relaxed for a duel. Let's see how long this lasts. Using the swift thunder technique, his sword flashed with light as he lunged forward once more. He covered himself in golden lightning. But Ziki escaped at the last second again. He's as fast as lightning itself, Ziki thought, but just then, Lika swung his sword mid-attack. The impact hit home this time, sending Ziki flying backward. A powerful shockwave scattered dust and debris across the area. Rangusu was out of breath. And in a great panic, she lunged toward Ziki, but one of the spectators grabbed her arm to stop her. Just then, Ziki had stood up. His clothes were scorched, but his will was ironclad. Lika attacked again with another bolt of lightning, striking him head-on. Despite this, Ziki was still standing tall after the blow. Lika muttered in disbelief, wondering how it could still stay standing. Rangus ran toward them and shouted, Master Lika, stop! That's enough! We've seen your power! But Lika said in a cold voice, Don't you understand, Rangus? He snapped back that cutting the fight short would be an insult to Ziki. In desperation, Rangus turned to Ziki, pleading, Please, Master Ziki, surrender already, enough! Lika giggled. He's right. Looking at your situation, it's smartest to just give up. If you kneel before me and swear your allegiance, I'll stay. But Ziki just smiled silently. Lika's gaze hardened. Even though you're a bastard, you're truly a proud ancient dragon, he said in a mocking tone. With his aura surging, he raised his great sword high. If that's what you want, then I'll use all my power to end this. Thunder roared from the heavens as Lika summoned her first secret art. Celestial thunder crashed as a massive wave of golden energy descended, shattering the stones beneath Ziki's feet. Lightning struck his body with a storm of divine fury. Rangus screamed in horror as he watched his friend's body. Smoke rose from his charred body, swallowed by golden lightning. Lika plunged her sword into the ground. He took a deep breath and whispered, I'm sorry, Ziki, but this is the end. But then a sound echoed through the crackling air. You think so? Suddenly, a brilliant golden lightning aura exploded toward the sky. When Lika turned around, her eyes widened in shock. Impossible. How can this be? How do you have a lightning aura? He stammered. Ziki smiled calmly as golden arcs danced across his skin. So, this is the lightning aura you're talking about, huh? He said it in passing. If you're asking how I got this, I honestly don't know. His voice was calm, but his words sent shockwaves through the crowd. Impossible, Lika whispered. He couldn't believe his eyes. Ziki grinned and said the truth is, I let you hit me on purpose. I wanted to study how your lightning flows and behaves, and somehow, I learned to use it myself. This is nonsense, Lika muttered to herself. Ziki explained the situation to himself. He deliberately drew Lika's attacks because he'd caught his interest in lightning and was withstanding the blows. He had constantly activated the Dragon King's breath technique, and the strange resonance between his breath and Lika's lightning caused golden energy to gather in his body. Before he even realized it, he had started manipulating the lightning himself. Maybe Lika has a unique constitution, he thought, and given his family's massive sword technique, his entire lineage likely has this lightning affinity. Ziki walked toward her with confidence. I never expected the lightning element's power to be so incredible. This duel was excellent practice. Adding with a grin, thanks to you, Lika, I've reached the 2-star level as well. Golden lightning flashed around him as he declared that our war was not over yet. Lika roared and attacked again, her massive sword glowing with power. He launched another blinding attack, but Zikai effortlessly stepped aside and prepared a counterattack. But the moment he moved, he vanished in a sudden flash and reappeared at the opposite end of the arena. He just muttered about what happened. Then he realized that when a person gains massive resource power, their muscles and nerves become stronger. This new lightning aura must have changed my physiology. I can't fully control my speed yet. Rangus was speechless in the stands. He could no longer follow her movements. Both fighters were nothing but a blur of golden light and thunder. Is it just me, or has Lika failed to land a single hit lately? He wondered. Frustrated Lika, are you making fun of me, Ziki? Stop messing with me, she yelled. Ziki calmly replied, no, I'm not, but I must admit it was a real threat. Then he lunged forward with a powerful kick, but Lika blocked it with her sword. The force of the blow pushed him back. Ziki straightened up with a smirk. I think it's time to finish this. Time to finish? Lika repeated, narrowing her eyes. Yes, Ziki replied. I've been thinking about creating a new technique for a while, and now seems like the perfect time. Did you say create a new technique? He asked in disbelief. Ziki nodded his head. Exactly. He paused for a moment, and then whispered, should I call this the first form, or a special form? Lika blinked her eyes in confusion. Did this guy even have any proper fight training? Which family could he have learned this from? He wondered, as his thoughts were all in a whirl. Before he could react, Ziki suddenly appeared by her side. Lightning was flashing in his hand. Dragon Destruction Martial Arts. He shouted, special form, Lightning Summit. The attack hit him directly, engulfing him in a violent storm of golden lightning. His body shook violently. As the sword slipped from his hand, he collapsed onto his knees before her. Electricity was still crackling around him. The arena has fallen silent. Rangus and the others stared in disbelief. Zeke had won. Lika, lying on the ground, let out a shaky breath. A few seconds later, he forced himself to sit up. He shouted, special form, Lightning Summit. The attack hit him directly, engulfing him in a violent storm of golden lightning. He thought to himself bitterly. Zeke approached her and reached out his hand. You were amazing, Lika. You're truly powerful, he said sincerely. Learning something new is always exciting. It was worth the fight, she added with a warm smile. It would be boring if this were our last fight. Let's do another practice match sometime. Lika froze. Her cheeks turned red. Looking at the hand he held out. Despite his defeat, a faint trace of happiness lingered on his face. Maybe out of pride. Maybe for the first time, out of admiration. One more time. Zeke said they should have a scrimmage again soon. With a confident smile, he added that he couldn't wait for their next showdown. Lika reached out to him, even though she was a bit shy. By accepting that it's not a balance. And he said he gladly accepted his defeat. Meanwhile, a few hours later, deep inside a dimensional rift, Balza Eldredon, father of Lika and Zeke and current head of the Eldredon family, was surrounded by countless. He was surrounded by strange and wild monsters. As the creatures lunged at him, Balza's eyes began to glow with an intense light. It released an overwhelming aura and dragon pressure, instantly freezing every creature in its tracks. Drawing his sword, Balza summoned the first form. The creation of the Dragon Destruction Martial Arts. With one fluid swing, all the monsters around were cleanly cut down. As he sheathed his sword, the Eldredon family soldiers rushed forward to finish off any remaining monsters that might have survived their master's blow. Balza turned toward tomorrow's exit. But before leaving, one of the soldiers called out to him, saying there was an important report. Balza stopped walking and asked what it was about. The soldier reported to him that Lady Lika had reached the 2-star level. Hearing this, Balza froze mid-step. Her glowing eyes flickered, and her response came out cold and distant. So what? The soldier, visibly nervous, explained that reaching 2-star level at only 7 years old was an extraordinary achievement. He added that with Lika's talent, she'd likely reach 4-star or even 5-star level by the time she graduates from the dragon's nest. Balza's reply was chilling. Talent means nothing. Next time you report to me, I want to hear how you can be useful, instead of these worthless updates. Get out of my sight. As Balza moved toward the exit of the crevice, the soldier fell silent, but just as he was about to step out, he quickly added that Lika had recently lost a practice match. Balza stopped suddenly and turned his head slightly. The expression on their face was unreadable. He asked if he was defeated by one of his brothers. The soldier shook his head. No, sir. Lord Zeke was defeated by someone his own age. Zeke, Balza repeated in a low voice. That's her son. Memories of that humble maid, Zeke's mother, flashed across his mind. That woman was truly skilled in battle, he muttered, but she died after giving birth to the child. He turned his face completely to the soldier. His tone of voice was harsh. Tell me, who could have trained Zeke well enough to defeat a 2-star fighter? The soldier hesitated before answering. No one, sir. Lord Zeke never received any formal training. Lady defeated Lika entirely through her own power and skill. He has even reached the 2-star level himself. I understand, said Balza expressionlessly. Then he turned around again and commanded. Start the first test. It was obvious that the soldier was startled. Lord Balza, forgive my insolence, but isn't it too early for the first exam? The students only started combat training a month ago. Most haven't even reached the 1-star level yet. Balza interrupted him. I don't care. Death knows no time, level, or favorites. Only the strong deserve to survive. If they can't handle the first test, their star levels mean nothing. Those who fail are not worthy of the eldritch name. Yes, sir, the soldier answered quickly. But then Balza added, also call Freya. Tell him to come back immediately. The soldier's eyes widened in utter disbelief. Is it Freya, sir? Or do you mean Freya? Balza nodded. Exactly. If Zeke could defeat Lika using only his own power, then he's much more interesting than I expected. I want Freya to design and supervise the first trial herself. I also expect him to observe each participant in person. The soldier bowed deeply. As you wish, Master Balza. For the first time in a while, a faint smile appeared on Balza's lips. He spoke softly, as a rare, almost warm expression crossed his face. That's the most interesting one of them. The next day, students continued their combat training at the Dragon's Nest, under Rengus's supervision. But Zeke was off to the side, leaning against the wall in a crouching position, practicing his breathing technique. He was balancing a massive rock over his head while holding dumbbells in both hands. This unwavering focus caught Rengus's attention. And he caught the attention of others, who couldn't help but watch him in silence. With his eyes closed, Zeke visualized the technique they'd been working on, the striking dragon martial arts. As he recalls, this technique was originally created by the 15th family head. Though called a martial art, it was actually a method of body strengthening. It was simple but well-structured, allowing even the youngest fighters to grasp it. Rangus called out to Zeke. Aren't you going to work out? Zeke opened one eye. What do you mean? I mean combat training, Rangus explained. We are practicing striking dragon martial arts. I already found that out, Zeke answered easily. Rangus was stunned. What? But we were just taught this morning. How did you master this already? Zeke smirked and said, Because I'm me. But what's more important right now is that the source power is flowing incorrectly. Rangusu was confused and asked what he was. Zeke set down the heavy rock, told Rangusa to turn around, and placed a hand on his back. Zeke fixed the energy flow and directed his aura into Rangus' body. This is it, said Orin. It should circulate like this. Rangus turned to him gratefully. You've truly mastered the striking dragon martial arts, huh? This is incredible. Zeke frowned playfully. Are you doubting me? What kind of a friend are you? No, it's not, Brangus said quickly. No one besides my father had ever taught me something like this before. That's why I want to learn everything I can. Lord Zeke, you already have your own martial arts. Lady Lick is strong enough to defeat them. I just thought basic dragon martial arts might be too simple and boring for someone like you. It's not boring, Zeke replied. Actually, I admire your consistency. It reminds me of my own dragon destruction martial arts. Though my kids never liked that technique. They used to say it was too difficult and complex. Dragon destruction martial arts was truly a complex and challenging technique, but it possessed immense power. It consisted of 4 main forms, and Zeke created a 5th one during his battle with Licca. Beyond that, he even had a hidden final form. A terrifying and destructive talent. The same technique he once used to slay the divine dragon. In his past life, he silently wondered how his descendants used other dragon techniques over time. Maybe they had changed them. This thought made him even more excited. Anyway, now that I've mastered the grandpa-beating dragon martial arts, I'll continue my physical training. He smiled slightly. Everyone has a different way of learning techniques. But before he could continue, Rangus suddenly yelled his name. Zeke, please teach me. I know it's a shameless request, but I want to get stronger, even if just a little. Zeke looked at her for a moment, then nodded. Well, I'll still teach you. Rangus blinked in astonishment. Wait, are you serious? Are you really going to teach me? Of course, Zeke answered. Why are you so surprised? You're the one who wanted this. I just didn't think you'd accept so easily, Rangus said shyly. I'm not lying, Zeke said, and I know he's someone worth teaching. Just then, Licca approached them. Zeke spoke, though he hesitated. I want you to teach me too. Rangus flinched and turned toward her. You too, Lady Licca? Is there a problem? He asked calmly. To be honest, I used to think that no one could ever beat me. As the candidate for the next head of the Dragon family, I was confident in my strength, but yesterday's match shattered my pride. I still don't know how you can use a lightning wanderer. Or how he uses it better than me. It was Zeke's drink. Well, is this my fault now? He muttered half-jokingly. Licca continued with determination. I want to be stronger. Strong enough to defeat our brothers. And you too, Zeke. Please teach me. Zeke went quiet for a moment, lost in deep thought. When Zeke didn't answer right away, Licca asked if it was really a problem for her, even though she is also a candidate for the next president of Eldon. Rangus Zekapik of the dragon family agreed, realizing that even as a child, Belzahel Dragon is still Zeke's father, which technically makes Zeke one of the heirs whether he likes it or not. Zeke calmly said he didn't care, but noted the real issue was whether Licca's body was fit for training. He added that from what he'd seen in their fights, healing those wounds would normally take at least a month. Licca shook her head and said she'd already used a healing potion, so there was no need to worry. He added that from what he'd seen in their fights, healing those wounds would normally take at least a month. But Rangus said if Zeke's talking about the basic potion from the entrance exam, it's not strong enough to heal Licca's wounds that fast. Because she was the head of the family's daughter. He must have used a much stronger potion. Zeke sighed in amazement, muttering that this era truly is something else. Licca nodded, admitting that without the potion, he'd have been bedridden for at least a month. But now he said the most important thing was his own request, whether Zeke would agree to train him too. Zeke knew he had to train too, but he wanted to get stronger under his guidance. Zeke accepted without hesitation, saying he never turns down ambitious young people. Licca de Rangusta was surprised by this answer. Licca noted that he is young like them, while Rangusta added that they are almost the same age. Zeke chuckled in agreement, then asked mockingly if he was really sure he wanted him as his instructor. After all, he was the one who defeated him. But Licca firmly stated that she didn't care one bit. He said if he wants to be the next head of the Dragon family, he doesn't have the luxury of being picky. He had to get stronger, no matter the cost. Zeke remembered Licca mentioning her dream of becoming the family head when they first met. Zeke asked why you're so obsessed with this target. Lika said without hesitation that if he failed to become the head of the family, he would only be used for a political marriage. Speaking bitterly, she noted that in the best case she'd likely be forced to marry a cousin, but the worst case would be marrying a total stranger. Zucchini's face fell, and with a flash of anger in his eyes, he asked what he meant by that. Lika said this was natural given how valuable L dragon blood is, especially among the 4 branches of the family. Source powers were unique and could be used in countless ways. That's why they were obsessed with keeping their bloodline pure. Rangus trembled as he felt the terrifying aura suddenly spreading from Z10. His voice turned cold and sharp as he said the L dragon family really started pulling this kind of disgusting shit. He clenched his fists, saying he would tear down such filthy and senseless traditions. But before things got any heavier, a few instructors arrived and instantly caught everyone's attention. As Lika blinked in surprise, wondering why they had come, Zeke muttered that the timing couldn't be any shittier. He was worried they might have heard what you just said. Just then, a woman with fiery red hair appeared behind them. One of the instructors stepped forward and announced that, regardless of how busy this person was, they would have a new instructor starting today. He took the time to teach them personally. So they should have been grateful as the red-haired woman approached. He reached his hand toward Lika and asked if she was Lady Lika. But Lika felt a wave of danger. Lika instinctively jumped back. Rangus grabbed Zeke's arm in fear as Zeke stepped forward to protect him. The red-haired woman smiled faintly. He praised Lika's sharp reaction, saying the quality of her aura wasn't bad at all. Zeke frowned slightly. Until now, he hadn't even sensed her presence. Rangus nervously asked who it was. With that, the instructor introduced her as Lady Freya Phoenix of the Black Dragon units. Freya greeted everyone with a polite smile. He said he was pleased to meet them all. Then she looked straight at Zeke and asked if he was Lord Zeke. When Zeke confirmed, the woman asked if he was surprised by her sudden appearance. Zeke calmly said that nothing he did was surprising. As Zeke's eyes began to glow faintly, Freya froze for a moment. Zeke said her hiding technique is quite interesting. Freya realized immediately why even clan leader Balsa and Drago were interested in this kid. Meanwhile, Zeke was analyzing the woman's movements. He noticed the origin power was concentrating in his lower body. It followed a flow pattern he had never seen before. This must be why the footsteps didn't make a sound. A spark of excitement appeared in her eyes. He was wondering what kind of martial arts the woman used. Then Freya took command of the class and confirmed she would be their new instructor. The students started to whisper among themselves in disbelief. Galewind, Lady Freya? He was known as one of the strongest warriors in the family. The other instructor confirmed that Freya is a 6-star practitioner. He belonged to the Black Dragons, an elite unit serving the Patriarch directly. The students were amazed, unable to understand why someone of his rank had come to their academy to teach. Freya smiled slightly and told them she would indeed train them, but on one condition: they had to pass a simple test. The students were breathless at these words. The woman told them not to worry, the test was simple. They just had to bring back one crystal, like the one you're holding, and survive for a whole month on Poison Dragon Mountain. While Rangus turned pale at the sound of this name, Zeke was filled with a sense of nostalgia. Venomous Dragon Mountain was home to countless poisonous creatures. In fact, touching even a single leaf would kill an ordinary person instantly. This was a total danger zone. Zeke remembered that in his previous life, he often used this place as his personal training ground. Still, he thought this test might be too cruel for young students. Freya explained the rules. Every student would get a crystal sphere, and if it broke or got lost, they'd be disqualified instantly. When someone nervously asked what would happen to those disqualified, Freya blurted out that they'd be kicked out of the dragon's nest. He added they didn't need to worry about poison. As long as they used the dragon breath technique correctly, they'd be safe. As long as they protected their orbs and controlled their breath, they could survive. When Lika mentioned that there were monsters there along with poisonous plants, Freya's eyes sharpened and she said they had to defeat those monsters on their own. Because it was the only way they could find food. They wouldn't last even a few days if they didn't hunt. Freya explained the rules. Each student would get a crystal sphere, and if their spheres broke or got lost, well, he doubted whether the striking dragon could harm the creatures there. Freya told them not to panic with a nasty smirk. They had 5 days to prepare. During this time, each of them could choose a fundamental martial art to learn from the Ledger family archives. If they mastered this, their chances of survival would increase. But if they failed to learn it within 5 days, he wouldn't take responsibility for anything that happened on the mountain. A student timidly asked if Freya would help them, in case things get too dangerous. Freya smiled slyly and said, "You are in the dragon's lair. You are in the lands of the elder dragon family. The weak can't survive here, only the strong remain. If you can't defeat a few slimy monsters on your own, then you're better off sleeping soundly in a bed of poison right beside them." The students were trembling in terror. Cold sweat was pouring down their faces. Rangus was about to whine, while Lika remained silent, lost in deep thought. Zeke frowned to himself, wondering if this was the same Ledger family he once knew. It was much different from when he was the head of the family. Freya then said that was all for now. He started handing out martial arts books for each weapon type and told them to step up and choose the technique they wanted to learn. As the students swarmed around him, Rangus hesitated, not knowing what to choose. Zeke advised him to get a spear technique. It reminded me that he used a spear in the entrance exam. Rangus accepted immediately and thanked him. Lika said she'll choose a great sword technique, since she already knows the basic forms for it. But Zeke stopped him and suggested he try the axe arts instead. When Lika asked why, Zeke explained. He said this would help cover its current weaknesses. Since Zeke made the suggestion, the girl didn't object and just nodded silently. He trusted her words. Freya then asked if everyone had chosen their books. Once they agreed, he told them to make the most of their remaining 5 days. Their survival depended entirely on mastering these techniques. If they failed, they would have died miserably on Poison Dragon Mountain. Just as she was about to leave, Freya suddenly remembered something and turned back. He warned them about their upper classes during the test. They were going to try to steal the crystal balls. Rangus took the donut and asked what he meant. Freya, their 10-year-old. He explained that the upperclassmen would take the same exam, but their task was to hunt the juniors and steal their orbs. He added that junior students outnumber seniors, and the Poison Dragon Mountain is vast. They could have been lucky and avoided the crossfire. Even so, the upper classes would do everything in their power to find and attack them. After Freya said that, she turned and left. Rangusen had turned pale, and sweat was pouring down his face. And now he asked what the hell they're going to do. They had to deal with not just poisonous monsters, but also the high ranks who hunted them. Lika frowned and said that every upperclassman is at least a 1-star level or higher. If they all swarmed him at once, he wouldn't last long. And he said most of his classmates probably wouldn't survive either. Siki nodded, saying the girl was right that Lika couldn't fight alone. Then he should have formed a group of 2 or 3. After all, cooperation wasn't forbidden. They could help each other hunt monsters. And they could defend themselves against the upper classes. When Rangus asked about Ziki's plan, Ziki briefly said he planned to go solo. And said they'd enjoy the exam. Lika sighed and admitted that it was exactly the kind of thing he would say. Before starting practice, Ziki suggested eating first. As they moved away, Lika glanced at Rangusa out of the corner of her eye. And she asked if you thought Ziki was acting a bit strange sometimes. Rangus shrugged and answered, "Yes, sometimes." 5 days later, the students gathered before Toxic Dragon Mountain with mixed feelings of fear and determination. Freya stood before them with a confident smile on her face. And he declared that the weather was perfect for the exam to begin. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see what happens next, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. This way, you won't miss the next chapter of this epic story.